Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith, and at the table we have a great clay courter, because if anybody has 4 names, according to Andy Roddick, that means they're great clay courter. Kervin Vasquez, but give us a full name.
Kervin Francescoli Ramos Vasquez.
And on the other end, we have Dave Anderson from Dallas. Dave, could you repeat that? Kervin's name?
Yeah. Vasquez.
Give it to us one more time. That's good. Kervin?
It's Kervin Francescoli Ramos Vasquez.
It's great when you gotta. There's a young player that played at Rice that I worked with, and he sent out to your place. His brother's name, Alejandro. Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about Manny and Alejandro Lama.
Alejandro said, "Call me Alex." I said, "Okay, Alejandro." That's a great name. You get ready to sing this. He's from Peru. A shout out to Jackie Calla from Peru. She was just named the head coach of the women's team at George Washington. I have to really thank Dave Secker for making that happen. Definitely an insider with the athletic director. Trust is always important when it comes down to job placement. But yeah, I think the theme is going to talk U.S. Open. Everyone's talking U.S. Open. By the time this comes out, U.S. Open will be over. Or the Monday, Labor Day, as we're chatting. But before we go there, the Bryan brothers, Dave McPherson, he referred to those guys as the Navy SEALs of tennis. What comes to your mind when you think of the Bryan brothers or the family?
You know, so many stories I've heard, directly and indirectly, from Wayne Bryan when he came and did a clinic. And you know, I think of the story of no TV. You know, they'd go to the club to watch tennis, and when he agreed to buy him one of those Nintendo or whatever those video game Xbox, and you know, they broke the rule on how long they were using it, and he came home, grabbed it, and walked over and they lived right near a cliff, and he tossed it over the cliff. And you know, I think between the mom's influence on their tennis games and the dad being a pretty firm guy, and I think they lived true to their goal that he said, which is always leave the tennis campsite wherever they go cleaner than when they found it. And I think they're great energy, great for the game. I think people forget they were usually 1 and 3 in America with rankings in singles all the way through, and Goldstein was kind of nestled in the middle of them. And I think tennis misses them. I'm surprised that they don't have more of a voice with what doubles is going through right now. But I think I really enjoy them. I think they're great.
The Bryan brothers, Patrick McEnroe said they get pumped up for breakfast. I think that's a great quote. The listeners, if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube and listen to the speech. It's an amazing speech. Tennis lesson in itself, big time. Wayne Bryan, I remember I did some work for the Roddick Tennis Academy, and I went with Connor. We had tickets through Andy's agent, put it together. And Connor and I were, you know, we went through a function where Wayne Bryan was a busload of young kids, maybe more than one busload. And they were there to watch practice. And, you know, he just talked to him, look straight ahead, you know, raise your hand if you need a washroom break. If you talk, you're out. You're not going to disturb practice. He had that group regulated. And then I had great seats, but I moved around and just to sit behind him in the intensity he had when they were winning. Of course, they closed it out. They beat Russia to win in 2007. No, I didn't know. Mark Bay, who had quite a few things to do with over the years, he's been a guest on our podcast. I know he was at the presentation at Newport. I didn't realize because I'd watched Bryan brothers practice many times, when they run on the court, they try to hit 500 balls as fast as they can. What came up, and I think people should know that Tiriac and Nastase used to do these specific drills every day for doubles. And Tiriac referred to himself as the best tennis player in the world who was not a tennis player. You know, he was an Olympian in ice hockey, black belt in karate. Just Tiriac's the character, Jan Tiriac. But they used to do these same drills all the time, and I think people need to realize they did it every day, the same basic drills, just routines. You know, it took them, the U.S., TA a while before they gave them the go-ahead to be the doubles team. They had to hang in there, pay their dues. How about with Maria Sharapova? What comes to your mind?
Sacrifice, from a very young age. I remember stories either in reading or hearing, I can't recall exactly where from, but, when she was shipped over, scouted and they found her and moved over to the U.S. and she would be a very young girl and just basically holding a teddy bear at night, crying herself to sleep because of initially missing the family, etc. A really driven father who was, instrumental in it. Lansdorp, his influence. I know Michael Joyce traveled with her for extended periods, but I just think of incredible sacrifice really. And I think every great champion, there's just huge amounts of the struggle and the sacrifice. And I think hers was very high.
Yeah, I think the book Unstoppable, Tennis Junior should read that. With her autobiography, I'm always telling parents and children a quote from Sharapova. At a very young age, I realized my father was for me, not against me. Because Yuri, of course, I've spent a lot of time around Russians. It seems like they're yelling at each other when they say good morning. I realized that my father was for me, not against me. She obviously has a great sense of humor. I think it was fun how she said during her speech, my father is still telling me that I need to serve volley, even though she's not playing tennis right now. But yeah, what a class act for tennis to have the presentations that they had. Yeah, let's go to the U.S. Open. $90 million. It's a pretty big event. 20% increase. I think, like so many people, we've talked about it over and over again, the mixed doubles. I think it was appropriate that a doubles team won. Yeah, it's just, so now it seems like there's no mixed doubles in the U.S. Open.
It was strange being there and not seeing any during the course of we'd consider the actual tournament.
Yeah, for our listeners, you just got back from being there for more than a week. And Kervin's dad told me yesterday that's where he wants to be, which is at the U.S. Open, huh?
Yeah, my dad is really passionate about tennis. Thanks for him. He made me and my brother play tennis, and that's why we are here now.
Yeah, they're both highly ranked in Peru. His younger brother's here. I know he's had some ATP points. It's a celebration of tennis. We have 4 a year. It's just such a massive event. Did you read about and we tell you about while you're there, the Polish CEO and the hat? Did you hear that story?
I didn't see it.
The Polish player, wins in 5 sets. His name escapes me right now. On the men's side, he's signing autographs and he takes his hat off to give to a kid, and this Polish successful businessman, grabs it, and it just went bonkers on. You saw it?
Yeah.
On the internet. But, the player got a hold of the young kid and gave him multiple hats and worked out pretty well on that side. But it wasn't great optics for the CEO of this Polish. I guess it's a contracting company where he actually, people keep adding the story that where he builds tennis courts. Yeah, where do you want to start? I have names written down. I thought we could start with names. I think I'll come back to you. You were there. I got a nice phone call with nice comments about the mom was thanking me. Their daughter just graduated not too long ago and, played at a prestigious university, and not mentioning any names. I get those calls, which is nice. I call it psychic income. And that's what you hang in there for. And you're never looking for a thank you or pat on the back. But it is nice when you come back and go, okay, all that effort. First thing that comes to my mind is how much better the player could have been. Stay the course, start the course, stay the course. It's the first thing. And then I think Jessica Pegula, got to plug the upstate New Yorkers. Maybe it's because her mom owned the Buffalo Bills. It's so easy to be the armchair quarterback. And it's so easy to be, sitting in your living room and I'm not the person who's going to say something or only put it out there behind a keyboard. I mean, I have no problem telling people eyeball to eyeball, this is what I think and this is what I know. Here's something for the listeners. A parent told me this other day is I got to listen to the first one. The second interview is over 2 hours. It's Novak Djokovic on Jay Shetty's podcast. It's just called On Purpose. It's a great podcast. And he was I believe his second guest, and he's had hundreds of podcasts at this point. He's a very dynamic speaker. Seems like a very highly educated guy. But Djokovic, what a deep thinker. And actually, I think back about this biography I have. It's page 17. Trying to think of the author. On Djokovic, where his childhood coach mentions buying Braden books. But during this podcast, he talks about his time with Jim Lair, who's obviously somebody who's really had a big influence on what we're trying to do with the GreatBase. You go, Dave. What do you got? Give us the thought. U.S. Open.
Well, it was the first time that I had the opportunity to watch Fonseca, and I think it, that people were referring to it, as the Fonseca effect because of the way that he really, captivates everybody in the stands, and I think he's great for the sport. There's so much hype. I really like his backhand side from a playing standpoint. There's so much good about his game. And obviously, I would feel that he's a guy who's going to continue to get better. But, your comment about how good they could be, you hope a guy like that is going to continue to work on his serve and a little bit on his transition, because he certainly does some good things when he's up around the net. But to just be in the stadium a couple of times when he's there, it's really, really electrifying the way the guy it's amazing. I mean, he's a little like a rock star out there, but very exciting to watch him. I think he's going to really help the sport of tennis. Overall, hits the ball fairly well, but definitely a guy who I think to maximize himself is going to find that he has to improve his serve technically, and hopefully he'll have the people around him that'll.
Selfishly, he was going to go to the University of Virginia, and we're 45 minutes away. We find ourselves in there watching tennis matches. Ricardo Accioli was on our podcast. Dave and I, listeners, we go way back to Tyler Junior College, Tyler, Texas. And I think this was before your time, Dave. We had the boys from Brazil. And to me, it's, I think, five players. Espiritu Santos, Cesar Victor's middle name was the Holy Ghost. Anyway, Roberto Calla, we just mentioned Jackie Calla, Roberto Calla from Peru. We're working with a player, Jonathan Skopiris. Obviously, I'm mispronouncing the name. Jonathan, he went on to play at Florida State. Amazing athlete. It's the same thing as the guy could have been so much better. He actually played with Matt and Chris Clore. The two brothers were never on this team at the same time, but Jonathan was on the team in between those guys. What an athlete. I remember he had been training in Spain, and he came to work with us, and I put cones behind the baseline, like 4 feet behind the baseline, so he wouldn't go past the cones. He thought he needed to be on the other side of the cones. But anyway, what Calla told me, Roberto said, Steve, this is how it's going to work with Jonathan. He's only going to practice on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because on Thursday, he's a Brazilian. As this Roberto from Peru going, he's got a pack on Thursday because he's going to the beach on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And when he gets back from being at the beach, he's got to rest. So he's only going to practice on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. But I do think that, certainly can't categorize, but the Brazilians have a little bit of fun. And I think you got to listen to the music, and you got to be able to dance once in a while. Just watching him, I've never watched him in person, but big ball striker.
Yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed seeing him.
You just throw out a name, Naomi Osaka.
Yeah, got to watch Osaka play Kazakhstina. It was a really odd score line. I mean, Osaka wins the first, loses the second, comes back in the third, but it was just kind of this roller coaster ride emotionally. And some of these people, I think that when you watch it, it's great entertainment value, obviously. And to me, there's a lot of just flying by the seat of their pants out there. Osaka is just kind of random redirecting of the ball and a little bit of anxiety or whatever she feels out there, and she starts decelling, and that extra backswing on her forehand doesn't catch up in time, and suddenly Kasatkina's defense, derails her temporarily. And it's an amazing story. She's so young still, you forget. But again, a player that, when she's energized in the right space in between her ears, she can really hit the ball. And another case of a player who I think, that the back end is just a money shot, and players run around their money shots all the time to get the forehand, and it just doesn't add up to me many times.
Well, phraseology, kill or be killed, first strike tennis, serve +1. No, for sure, they put themselves outside of the court. I like how Larry used to say, ask your players at the end of a point, did they play aggressive percentage tennis? And she's playing aggressively. Just think of the change, though. I'm glad you mentioned how young she is. How much change she went when she wins some majors, and like how Braden used to say, it's the person doesn't change, but the people around the person change. And then you get personal where, they were living in a 2-bedroom apartment, and now she's, millions upon millions of dollars were made initially. But it just seems where it's very low percentage tennis. It's almost like she has to be hot. How's it go? You need to be able to still win when you're at your worst.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case with her at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think she's capable of that really too much at this point in her life. I think, like you said, she's got to be on and she's got to be loose, and she's got to have a lot of things factoring in the right way in order to maybe see her brilliance. Yeah.
Let's go to Taylor Fritz. I think he's improved so much. Now he plays Djokovic, where I've always liked how Ty Tucker would talk about how someone starts a point, both on the serve and on the return. I mean, obviously that's such a big part of the game. And Fritz, even despite inefficient grips, it's amazing how he takes the ball early, how he returns. I mean, it's a no-brainer how well he serves. I just think back about a kid like that. Dad's a teaching pro, obviously played the game at a high level, but his mother, top 10 in the world. Like, how long did he go before he could beat his mom in a baseline game? It's like Mickelson. You read about Mickelson. Actually, Ivano Suretz spent a lot of time around the family growing up, and got a mom who can just keep the ball in play. Talking about the Bryan brothers and Kathy Blake. Those lessons are hard to replace. But if you there's a lot of times kids they'll learn through experience, but they won't learn through advice. There's a lot to be said about just keeping the ball in play. I think Craig O'Shaughnessy. You know him better than I do, but the first 4 shots, he certainly has made an impact on making people think about stats, and he's certainly a proponent of people going forward, going to the net. I heard the stats after the first week: 25,000. This U.S. Open, 25,000 points played. Less than 2% of the points were serve and volley, but 68% of those points were won. But with Fritz, and he's just really a pretty much steady Eddie being in the second week of majors now. What are your thoughts on Fritz?
Yeah, I did have a chance to watch him play a full match. And, even before that, I like you said, he's so good on the first 2 shots. And the first time if I had to pick one word, it would be compact. I think he's extremely compact, despite the grip being under quite a bit, but he's just so compact and takes ball very early. I think he, has the missing element that many players, seek, and that is he just really loves to compete, and you get that sense. I think he moves on really well. Mistakes don't manage him. To me, in the match I watched, it appeared like he was trying to go forward. I mean, at least it looked like there was a conscious effort of trying to go forward. You know, it was a match that he was in control of for sure. You could see it. I could, could definitely see that there was something there that indicated he was at least aware of it and trying to. Still looks a little like a fish out of water when he's up there, but good for him that he was trying to.
Go ahead, Kervin.
So this is probably my first time watching more tennis than my entire whole life. Here at the tennis house, we spend lunch, dinner, just watching matches, and that's been incredible for me. And I was just listening, hearing commentators saying on the TV, every time that the Fritz has a break point, it's basically a set point for him because he's doing such a great job holding his serve. And just adding a little bit more of what you said about the 25,000 points that less than 2% of them serve on volley. What you also said that they don't serve on volley because they are in program to do it. They don't practice it at the very early stage, right?
Yeah. Pancho Gonzalez, Braden used to always say, he was very good on the return because he knew he was going to hold. So he could swing freely. I love to tell people with Monica Seles, your father, 2 baskets a day, which about 500 balls would serve to her from the service line. And Vic used to say that maybe that still would stand true today, that she took the ball earlier than anyone in the history of the game. You go back and watch, she was not textbook with, the crossover on one side. She played 2 hands on both sides, but they just staying in early too. I mean, that's one thing. Fritz doesn't get so far behind the baseline when he returns. Matt Clore, who's had a lot to do with almost 20 years now, I really met him through my son, Connor, when Connor was recruited for college tennis. I'd always heard his name because he was born in 84, just like one of our students, Ryler DeHart, but I just had not seen him play. And he says that Taylor Fritz is the second most competitive tennis player in America. Just a mindset, and use that as a legway and transition into talking about Coco Gauff. Gavin McMillan in the serve. Being at home versus being at the Open, probably a lot more hype sitting in your living room hearing people talk about her serve than at the Open. What are your thoughts on Coco?
Yeah, so much emotion, right? And so much drama surrounding that whole thing. I think it's interesting to hear everybody's take on it. I think it's interesting they would pick the opening week of the tournament to really, and a little bit before, but to really try to go to work on it. It depends on what lenses you look through it at in terms of, hey, that's good that you're doing it and playing the oak tree today and just addressing it straight on. And the other side of it is it could have waited a little bit, a week or two, and then really gone into it hard. I think that even with the work Sabalenka did, I don't think I'd be curious to hear your take on it, but I don't think the core of the problem was necessarily fixed as much as people think. But with Gauff, it's been, there was quite a buzz about it up there. I was kind of surprised that they did it in the manner that they've worked on it on, but she's incredible. The girl can run and she can retrieve, and I think I do believe she's right up there too, and the top of the list, like you said. She just wants to play point.
Well, Coco Gauff, I asked a group of kids today, what would be more difficult, to change her serve or change her forehand? And, everybody agreed her forehand. I don't think her serve would be that difficult to change. For our listeners, you could just plug this on YouTube. John Craig, who I never crossed paths with, but I understand that through Paul McDonald, who was connected with Vic Braden Europe and actually worked for Vic out in California as the general manager at one point of a tennis college. And Paul just told me that John is, he's out there teaching tennis, but he's not really coinciding with Braden principles. So but anyway, with John Craig, Craig, there's an interview. The Canadian coach, he's from Toronto. He grew up playing ice hockey, and it says during the interview at 16, his dad, said, "Hey, you're out of hockey." I was going to treat him. Why would that be? But there could be 1,000 reasons for that. But he went to Pierre Lamarche's academy in London, the All Canadian. And Pierre at that time, that would have been in the 80s, back when you and I were studying tennis in Tyler, Texas, Pierre had people from all over the world. I'd go, "This is Pierre Lamarche." I got to meet him years later. And it's like, how is this guy getting people from New Zealand or Australia, where the sun is shining, to come to London, Ontario to train, hit tennis balls in the winter? But he was part of that. And then how he got connected with Sabalenka was through Dusan Vemic, the Serbian, who's a generation ahead of Djokovic. And Sandy Fitzgerald told me that Dusan Vemic has looked at our content and been complimentary towards what we do. But if the listeners went to that, John Craig is interviewing Gavin McMillan, and I think he handles himself really well. I think people should listen to that interview. Very, very intelligent guy, very insightful. And about, the high toss, what's the primary flaw? Is it a symptom? So yeah, with Sabalenka, he was really talking about her forehand being a bigger problem. One of our young students with his dad, I would think my telephone, Dave, in this class we used to have, Kervin, our listeners, for to be a tennis teacher, my telephone could be a course. Just what I'm sent by people. And it's fun. It's fun to get all the clips and this and that. But I was sent a clip of Sabalenka on the practice courts hitting left-handed forehands. And she was just being tossed left-handed forehands. And, then he mentioned, he mentions that in the interview, but then he talks about her forehand. It's a very, very good interview. So yeah, but I think the timing of it, I just think the serve, the body's a leader. The body's going the wrong way. It's just, it's going to be hit or miss. It's going to be but then, then stress comes into it. But, a year ago, it was so confusing. It was just a year ago, right, that she won the tournament.
Yeah.
And Brad Gilbert's helping her, and Andy Roddick recently, same thing. I'm from Nebraska. I don't do grips. Gilbert doesn't do grips. You can help someone without changing the grips, but there could be a artistic approach on how to help her with her forehand. Because from the volley position, she's pretty conventional on a forehand volley, and then just go back and say, well, let's talk about the options. But it would take some time. It would take some time. But the biggest, I asked these juniors today, what's the biggest plus about the calculations on her forehand side? And one of the players, actually someone who's already played college tennis training to be a pro, had the answer. And told her she's a valedictorian because people aren't pressuring her. They're not serving to her forehand and giving her a small target. They're not coming in behind it. They're not, let's just say, let me see you pass with that forehand. Granted that there is some pressure, and even though the doubles for the most part is one up, one back, is that, can you get the return away from the net person? But she plays Osaka tonight. We're going through charting up here. There's going to be some red zone airs. It's going to be home run tennis.
Like Gauff, her return of serve is really feast or famine on the forehand. It's funny. People just, it's funny how many people just, everybody knows it. It's not a secret that even serve to her backhand. I don't know if there's any rationale to support it, because it's really hit and miss, it seems, on the forehand return.
No, it's like, if you listen to the players, Djokovic it's the court side. It's not the press room. It's post match, and they're asking him about playing long points, and he goes, "Well, I'm not a natural serve and volleyer." He goes, "I'm working on it. I do come in some. I'm better than I used to be." Right court side. where you can just hear what they have to say. Coco Gauff said about Pegula with the Olympics, and is she going to stay around long enough to play in LA? Where Djokovic has said that he wants to stay around long enough to play in LA. Coco Gauff said to Pegula, you hit the ball so well, so clean, you could play forever. And she could really be helped on her serve, Pegula. But what a winner. She played some doubles with Austin Krajicek, and Austin's such a class act. I don't think he had one enemy. And I just say, Austin, if you're comfortable with this, but he wasn't. I said, I've mentioned this before. Andy Fitzell and Raven Klaasen doing some work on the tour is they could have really helped her with her serve. And that's where maybe the new coaches that she has can do that as well. But then if that's the case, you would see it. That's what's interesting is that they have new coaches and fair enough. I think the celebrity coach, the high profile coach, they're more of a mentor and a confidant. It's not like they're doing X's and O's and nuts and bolts, which means certainly the technical and the tactical. Yeah, let's go on. What do you got, Kervin? Anything for us on the Open?
I think it's going to be pretty entertaining to see, to watch today, Djokovic and Fritz. And then we just saw Djokovic last night against Zverev. He basically destroyed him. Very consistent, making returns, holding serves pretty good, being aggressive when he has to be aggressive, coming to the net when he has to come to the net, identifying good balls. And that and I think the doubles that we watch with these college players, Harris, and I think the other one was Tracy.
Tracy.
Yeah, we talked about them. I know you spent some time with Andy Fitzell, but you're right. I mean, I think the journalists. And we decided before we came on there, we talked to Kervin that we would do this in English instead of Spanish. That's because Anderson can't speak Spanish. I'm fluent, but
I don't speak Portuguese.
English and profanity. That's what I have down. But the term destroy, I remember Robin Soderling. It was straight sets, and the point differentiation against Federer at Wimbledon was 7 points. But I know Andy has spent time with someone who came to us when he was 6 years old. His dad brought him over, Henry Squire. Andy's been in that loop where he's practicing with Struff. Understand that Struff was not that great a junior, but he had to qualify for this Open. But he did get beat pretty solidly, but at the same time, I would wonder what the point differentiation was. But with Struff, that the guy's a fantastic tennis player if he's played Djokovic 7 times. I think of Madison Keys' husband, Bjorn Frantangelo, who watched play growing up, and he played Djokovic at Indian Wells, went 3 sets. I mean, that's something that you can tell your grandkids. But I think another interesting match. Well, let's just go on the one that you mentioned, Kervin, is that Father Time could help Fritz. He's so good. He's 4 in the world. I think of the late Dave Schneider from Texas. He used to say, can they just go to the net and poke one volley? That, when you get people so far out of the court, I mean, if he just were to go in, I mean, if he could just set points up a la Jimmy Connors, the way he used to play, where he'd set points up for one volley. When you have that chance to go in, if it's a green light point, we're ahead by 2 or more points. It's that I'm just going. But you got to do that early. It's like Chris Evert said to Djokovic one time. And what a great tennis mind you think as a player. I spent a lot of time at Christie's Academy, and watching what they do with forehands and backhands isn't necessarily say, well, that's the tennis mind. But she said to Djokovic, and I guess I'm going too fast, but like say at an academy, and I understand where the parents they go to a place like Florida because they want it and they want it now. We didn't come to Florida to change our game. We came to Florida for competition. And then they don't realize that the competition, there's just more of it. It doesn't mean that it's better. There's just more players. It's not that there's a lot of quality tennis. But Everett asking Djokovic, well, you're winning convincingly in these early rounds. Do you ever think about going forward? And if you looked at old film, I would say this about Everett. It's like Jimmy Connors. He was playing team tennis in Dusseldorf. Remember they had that event? And he's telling young Robbie Seguso, he's giving him some doubles advice. And Seguso, not having a handle on tennis history, laughs and says, Connors, what do you know about doubles? And he goes, well, I do. I know that he won Wimbledon, he won the U.S. Open. And then big money came into it and people quit playing. But I'm telling, watching these matches with kids, is that you can still practice doubles and not be in the doubles tournament. I used to tell my son Connor, I said, why don't you, at the end of a practice, just ask the person you practice with, let's play at least 2 games of ghost doubles. You serve 1 game, I'll serve 1 game. Just practice doubles, even though you're not playing doubles. And then you can get kids to look at it, because they don't really care about doubles. They're just, it's not in their eyes, that is. But go ahead, Dave. What do you got?
No, I did see some good doubles up there. Cash and Tracy, who you mentioned, I know Andy Fitzell is working with him, and I got to watch their round against Bopana. Those guys are solid. They're got to watch, Coach George Goldoff go against Salisbury and Skupski, who I thought was, it was a great match from Salisbury and Skupski. And Salisbury's a lot of fun to watch on the doubles court, and Glasspool and the other Cash, Julian, got beat first round. They've been dominating the tour this year and got beat by one of their former partners, Callaway and his partner. But so I saw some really good doubles. Then I saw some very average doubles, and there was really no middle ground in between. It was just kind of what I would consider very solid fundamental doubles, and then typical doubles that you're seeing out there in juniors, college, and some of the tour, just played by better athletes out on the tour. It was interesting to me, the 2 teams that won the NCAA wild card both won a round. The team that won Kalamazoo won a round, but they played non-doubles players, David Goffin and somebody else. And so, I think that I hope doubles is here to stay, and I hope it, can be played much like Cash, Tracy, and some of those other teams were playing. It's way more exciting to watch from the spectator end. They will fill in the stands. I think that the people really appreciate the incredible speed and quickness of the players when you're seeing it up close like that.
I was at the Open several years ago with Arvind Arvindan, made it happen at Tennis Pro in Philadelphia. Andy was with me, maybe both years, but definitely one. And the Indian players watch the Indian players, so we're with this in qualies, Ram Ramanathan. And I charted 177 points. This is singles, didn't hit 1 topspin return. So we're sitting outside where you enter the building that the players lounges in. And I said, wait right here. I'll be back in 10 minutes. So Opana was watching the match, and I went and found him and said, hey, if you could come and help us out. And I said, we'll wait. And he said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. I just went through. I said, please interrupt me. Please challenge me on anything I have to say. And just going through the stats. I think what happens is when you make the big show, is your game good enough to really make the big show? Like, say if someone's playing juniors, well, that's not the main draw. If someone's playing qualies, that's not the main draw. And then hats off to all the parents and all the players who just make it to the big show. Just even college tennis, we're always saying only 3% of kids who play junior tennis play college tennis. But Bopana, I mean, it's a great story about with his age and still playing. But actually what Federer says, or what Federer has said, both singles and doubles, that the system should be changed where they double the points and they double the money. So it's very difficult. And a lot of people don't realize during the tournaments that are non-slams, the doubles draws are very small. So to make the cut to actually play doubles, and if the old guys hang in there and they have 2 good tournaments a year, they get to stay at the top. They get to stay at the top. what Fed has always said is that hey, if you make it to the quarters, you had a really good tournament. But the point distribution should not just double every time you win. To me, an interesting point. How about Bublik? Why do you comment on him? You had a chance to see him at all?
Did, yeah. He was at the top of my list of the people I was writing down as well. He's a big name in our house because my 5-year-old grandchild, that's been his favorite player for like a year and a half. I have no idea why, but when they do their little, pretend they're a famous player and play their matches in the living room, he's always Bublik. I think it's an example of somebody that has made a decision to, try to maximize their potential a little bit. And it's always been there. He's always done so many unique things with what he can do on the court. But I think that, it just seems like a few months back, really, that he was leaving Indian Wells and playing the Challenger in Phoenix. And I think he lost to Mute in the final there, if I remember. But it just kind of then off to Europe and Miami and then Europe. And then he just kind of went on this different quest, I think. And I think everything, ultimately begins in the mind with a decision. And good for him that he realized the window doesn't stay open forever. Hopefully he can continue it. Seems to have a very balanced perspective on life. I mean, some of his interviews, but I love the way he goes forward. I mean, there's so much to like about his game. And I think he's exciting to watch. I'm really looking forward to the battle with Sinner. Of course, it's really quick, and it could be an interesting matchup.
Well, he's beat him the last 2 times. I think being a Russian who now has pledged his services to Kazakhstan, he plays with a smile on his face. He plays with variety. He plays with different patterns. I think it's wrong for people to say, well, he throws people off their game. I think it's no, he's just not playing one-dimensional tennis like everybody else, like almost everybody else. But yeah, that match is later today. That should be very interesting to watch. Who are you picking, Coach Kervin? Bublik or Sinner?
Tough, because after you said he just beat Sinner 2 times in a row, he just beat Tommy Paul, no?
Yeah, I stayed up and watched that. I stayed up and watched a lot of matches almost every night. With
all the American people in the stadium, he's very smart. He runs for everything. He just fights for every ball.
For a guy 6'5", he moves with. He's a smart guy though. He's being interviewed, and first thing he wants to do is mention, his thoughts for Ben Shelton being injured, or Tommy Paul coming up lame, injured in the 5th set. He said, well, I haven't beat him in 5 sets, talking about his wins over Sinner. That's one thing to say for someone's going to take, say you have Djokovic, to take 2 sets from Djokovic on a given day, but take 3. Listeners, I mean, anytime the scoring system is shortened, in the mixed doubles playing to 4, tiebreakers played to 10. I mean, I know the Battle of Boca, which is a nice service in many ways, but the backdraw, the backdraw, you're playing to 4 and the tiebreakers to 7. So everyone just go home early. I mean, it's just, that's where we said the parents should protest. They should boycott junior tennis. But then someone would say, well, no, some parents would like it because then it'd be easier to win a 2-inch trophy. The parents should have their own circuit because they're paying more money and playing less tennis. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that match. I do think a lot of Djokovic fans would like to see him win 25, and for someone to knock out Sinner Alcaraz, because they have a little bit of an edge being younger, but also once you beat someone, not only does it help that person say, well, I beat him once, I could beat him again. But when the top players like a Djokovic, if he has it, I mean, he's been in 3 semis this year, 3 out of 3 of the majors. But, once a top player starts losing based on father time, then other people think, hey, I got a shot too.
The locker room points start to go away.
Yeah. What do you mean by locker room points?
Well, over-respecting somebody. I mean, not maybe over-respecting, but so much respect for somebody that, they kind of have a little bit of an edge going in. Maybe you play to bad targets. You do a lot of things you wouldn't do against a player that you have a history of doing quite well against, or, that you have a really good chance to beat. I think it happens in junior tennis a lot too, just by people looking at the draw and seeing seeds. I think they go in and they're already down. First ball hasn't even been hit yet.
Yeah. How's it go? 7 out of 10 matches are predetermined. They're over before they even start. How about Tommy Paul? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, on the player in the journey, obviously he's, again, another one that, like I was saying with Bublik, who seems to have flipped the switch. I think the way Tommy Paul flipped his switch and went from a much different path early on to where he is now, and quite driven. And I think he's exciting to watch. I like that he's not afraid to go forward. I love how he takes returns and goes. And I think when he's not injured, when he's healthy, I think he can play and beat anybody in the world. And he's certainly proven that. And I think he's good for American tennis in particular. I think the kids like him. I wish he hit the ball a little cleaner on his, forehand side. I think that his influence he's had on junior tennis players has been strong in that way. Some of the extra moves he makes, I see it quite a bit when we inherit kids or when I go out to tournaments to watch. But as far as, competitiveness and fight, how he's grown up and really matured into being a professional, I think it's been fun to watch.
No, he's solid top 20 guy now. He won the French Open juniors. Yeah, he does have an extra segment on the forehand side. He's got to calculate that. Very horizontal on the backhand. You hear so many things as an outsider that at Lake Nona, USTA National Campus, that of all the athletes they've trained, he's been at the top of the list, whatever the testing protocol is. But he had that sitter forehand volley. And, when it comes down to, like, say, the drawbacks of a continental grip, he was watching, he said that he was watching old films like Tim Henman and Pat Rafter. Once we mentioned to someone that there's no perfect grip, just a grip with the least amount of adjustment. But when you're hanging on to a continental grip, say a right-hander, and you're up at the net, the racket is pointing to the opposite court. Like, where do you get the 45 degrees? You turn the racket 8 times, the 8 bevels, 360 divided by 8. Yeah, he's certainly more of an athlete than he is a tennis player. And I do think people get awestruck by, hey, the guy's top 20 in the world. How could you criticize him? We're not really criticizing him. But when you mentioned, junior players watching how loosey-goosey that forehand can be, it's like, this guy, Rafa, he broke the code by having vertical swings. I understand his golf game's the same. It's not the prettiest. I've heard they're going to have the four-player golf event, Federer, Djokovic, Murray, and Nadal, and they all know Nadal's going to win. But I've heard that he's not the prettiest golfer. But, pretty, I mean, when you think about what happens at the impact point, showing the contact point, showing the angle of the racket up, the human eye can't see that. Like say with Rybakina, I mean, she's won Wimbledon, but if someone could say she could just do a few things differently, and it's a case study. It's case study it's not individual by individual. It's case study by case study. It's been playing points. The speed of the ball is so much faster now, and playing on a hard court. Granted, they can play every other day, up into the end where the men, if the semis are on Saturday and the finals are on Sunday, shorter points and principle-based tennis. I mean, if kids grew up when the ball is short, you go. And, today we have another visiting pro whose level play is not that high. We have a junior who plays a much higher level, and we filmed it. And I said, you have to learn how to play against lower level players. Play in second gear. Don't have an attitude, but just play and win through placement, not win through power. And if kids just understood that, parents listening is, parents will ask me, well, who's going to be in my child's group? And I say, well, that's a dumb question. What's your next question? And, if you have a smile on your face, you can say that. But also, too, if you've been doing it for 100 years like I have, I tell young coaches, don't talk to parents that way. But yeah, I think then if they were to say, why is Alcaraz so good? Did you get a chance to watch Alcaraz?
Watched him work out, yeah. I think I sent you a
oh, that's right.
A snapshot of what I wish the whole world would just kind of grab hold of. And I think I actually did watch him play the first match or the first few days. Gosh, I mean, I think he, kind of like what I said about Fonseca, but I think Alcaraz is a refined, polished version of all of that. But just amazing for our sport and truly can play all over the court. And, talking about going back to Bublik in center and Bublik's lack of fear for coming in and does a decent job up there. And to see Alcaraz be able to cover any zone of the court and hit any shot, it's a lot of fun. And I just love that the guy is always smiling. I was at the Open last year when he played that qualifier first round, and it was in that period of his life, for whatever reason, he wasn't having a lot of fun on the tennis court. You could really, the vibe was completely different 12 months ago. And so whatever he was going through for, 8, 12 weeks or a little longer, maybe last year at the end of the year, he certainly learned to manage it better and got the joy back, the sense of fun that he needs to have in order to play his best.
With Alcaraz, when Ivan Osirets mentioned on one of these podcasts, Alcaraz 1 versus Alcaraz 2. Alcaraz, who's more staying in the pocket, looking to come forward versus putting himself way out of the court, hitting his forehand. His forehand is lethal, but it's just interesting to speculate that way. How about South America? Alcaraz is huge, I bet.
Actually, talking about Alcaraz, the first time I watched him in person was on 2021 on the US Open. He was playing against Cameron Norrie and I think court 19. And he didn't have that many tools as he has right now. I think he really worked really hard on getting tools on his tool bag. And I would say now that he's probably one of the most complete players in the circuit. Like in a good day, he will just beat Sinner right now, but he's probably one of the not too many people that can beat Sinner right now. But yeah, I think he's talking from South America, being a clay player, like everybody will admire how hard he fights every point, how much run he puts into it, so how many workout he puts into it. That's why like South Americans are usually warriors in the court. Like they fight for every point. They don't give up very easy. You got to kill them if you want to win against them. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I said earlier in the week, I just saw the third set yesterday, but I was talking to someone from Miami, actually Andres Barbosa, and I was sweeping clay courts. So I said, keep talking to me. And it was the tiebreaker with Townsend, where she had 8 match points. But earlier, it's like 48 hours before that, I just made the comment, Taylor Townsend, they should put her in charge of the USTA. What are your comments on Taylor Townsend, her tournament? I'm sure she's still in the doubles too, right?
Yeah, she is. She had a great run. She's had a great run there before. And, a few years back, and she was going forward a lot back then. Everybody was kind of like, oh, she's going to bring back serve and volley. It can still be done. And I forget what year it was, but it wasn't that long ago. She's a fighter. She is fun to watch. I like the way she adds things to the women's game that many people have kind of forgotten about and thought couldn't exist in the current game. And she certainly proves a lot of that wrong. I think that, I was watching the match right next, actually. It was Hamilton's match. And and Townsend was coming on the court for her doubles, and I mean, just a roar right next door. I mean, you would have thought it was Arthur Ashe Stadium, even though it was a back court, and so she's won a lot of respect through all the controversy over this week, and you know, it's been fun to watch her do well, and again, kind of a second phase of her career. And I remember watching her when she was a junior at a few of the nationals, and it's always fun to see people, you know, make a comeback, kind of.
You know, Jacob Kennedy, who spent some time at your place. Yeah. I worked with Jacob. He's helped out as a practice partner, maybe even some coaching. I don't like the term old school, new school. There is no school, but bringing it back, proving a point that you can play all court tennis, and, you know, going forward in doubles. So that's why I mean, you know, run the USTA is someone has to step up and say, you know, you got to be able to play this game from the service line in. How about the girl from the Czech Republic, Karolina?
Muchova, yeah. Muchova. I would put her in that same category. I think you know, it's I don't know exactly what the status is on her wrist injury, but I know I went through a version of that, and I think it was the U.S. Open, a year ago, that she basically threw everything in right after that and had that bad ECU tendon issue, and she was back at the tune-ups for Wimbledon, and I don't think I think that she probably needed the time off, because she isn't. I mean, she still has so many skill sets, and she definitely is unable to hit the ball off both wings like she was because of the wrist injury. But I love, again, watching her play. It's kind of the opposite, in my opinion, of what we talked about with Gauff and Fritz and some of these people who you really consider gamers. I think Muchova, for whatever reason, I think she has a history of freezing in moments, and you know, she finds ways to lose, it seems, compared to those others. But I love watching her skill sets. I think she's great for us as coaches, trying to build great foundations in kids, and so many positives to it. But I hope she, you know, takes the time she needs to get that thing fully recovered. As we saw with Delpo, it can certainly be troublesome through your career.
I was sent an article that she was thrown off and lost a set, had to come back and win in 3 because she saw that her ex-boyfriend was in the stands. And someone sent me an article. So what do you think of this? Everything reminds me of something. Jimmy Connors, at one point, you know, and you're under the microscope in the public eye. So he was, maybe it was short term, I think it really was, but he was separated. You know, the word on the street was he might be going through a divorce, but he was separated from his wife, Patty. And the word was, well, Connors won't have a good Wimbledon. And he won it. You know, sometimes with problems that people can have off the court, when they do step on the court, that's their genius, is that they step on the court and that's their sanctuary, that they don't have the problems when they're on the court. But I really think that Karolina, how do you pronounce her last name? Muchova?
Yeah, Muchova.
She, I don't think she's as good as she thinks she is. I mean, I think she's better. She's better than she thinks she is. She's so close. And, you know, just, you know, that is where the coaching comes in, where coaching, you know, it can be the confidant, the mentor, the relationship, to just push a few buttons, because I think she's certainly capable of, you know, of winning majors. Obviously, she's been in the final before, so that's not really rocket science to say. But I think that she could be a more of a contender tournament after tournament.
Yeah, I agree.
Too bad that Ben Shelton was injured. It's amazing. Top 10 in the world. You know, I mean, he's the Air Force. He's dropping bombs with that serve. But he's athletic. He's aggressive. He goes for it. I do think there's some edifying when, you know, Andy Roddick talks about how much he's improved his underspin backhand. I mean, you can say, oh, certainly it's better, but you just see the calculation he has with his strokes. Coming back to two players that are wearing New Balance, I think of this when I think of watching Coco Gauff's New Balance and Tommy Paul's New Balance. And Evan Cedar was way up the ladder. And I have this all on film. So he's a big kid, like 15 years old. And I mean, their father, John Cedar, he's as tall as a tree. I mean, he's got two sons and he's taller than both of them. These kids, when they were younger, I didn't coach the older brother for maybe a paragraph. But they both played for Tylee, Illinois. And when they were younger, they didn't go forward. They just bang balls from the baseline. But we have film where Zeder, each made all these changes. And, then he got good enough where he could go by the time he was around, it wasn't just stay at home and just practice, go play clay courts and hard courts indoors. At the most, there was 3 nationals. And now you got level 2s and level 3s and the whole landscape of junior tennis changed. So right away he was in a position where he could play all these nationals. And I was just telling him, take more time. But the reason I bring that up is, to me, it's all about trust. If you could get a player to listen to you, but the problem is the better the player becomes, the more opinions they hear. Because almost everybody, I've just told a lot of people, you change your last name to coach on the tour. They do anything to be around it. But Sheldon cracking into the top 10, certainly with any player, I hope the injury's not too bad, but very similar to a lot of the other players, Tiafoe, Tommy Paul, Fritz. There's a couple reasons holding them back. And it comes down to what they can do or not do with a tennis racket. That's the name of the game. It's interesting. Criticism, maybe because there was a lot of beer drinking, but when my oldest brother was the assistant hockey coach at New York Rangers, Dave Maloney, who went on to be the captain, he was a rookie. And I had been out of tennis for years, and out of hockey for years, But I was there because Madison Square Garden was hosting the year-end tournament. And so anyway, I just remember telling Maloney, didn't you work at Bobby Orr's hockey camp? And I said, yeah. I said, didn't you ever learn to slide the puck? Don't you know how to slide the puck when you try to advance with a pass? And why I say that is that culture is that people are just open to criticism. It's just you walk in the locker room and that's just the way it is. People walk on eggshells. It's like the guy I met at your place, Craig Carden. He said about coaching world team tennis, but I think it's pretty much, it can be that way. The people that are hanging around the futures and trying to coach players. Carden said, you got to talk all day and say nothing. Instead of like, hey, it's broken and it has to be fixed. It's like Lendl who skipped the French, and at that time Tony Roach said, hey, it's your ego and your pocketbook. What you don't just skip the French, which he did. He skipped the French. I think it was 87 where he lost to Pat Cash. And he didn't play the French because he won everything but Wimbledon. And Tony Roach said, you need to play year round. It doesn't matter what surface you're playing. If you want to do better at the net, you got to play year round at the net. I'm always baffled, but when Wimbledon comes around, that the top players don't really work on, they don't live their life to win on grass. They don't live their life to say, I want to win Wimbledon. That would be my opinion. If they did, you would find them not playing, or they're playing the same on all 4 surfaces now. And I know the grass has changed. Here's another name, Rublev. What do you think of Rublev?
Well, I got a kick out of watching. Again, that's again my youngest grandson. That's one of his favorite players. So I think he definitely has an affinity toward temperamental Eastern Europeans. But yeah, I enjoy watching him. Watched him up there. Watched a few of his practice sessions. it was interesting because of the hype around him this year with Safin. And Safin was kind of entertaining the crowds at the practice courts. But I think it's a guy that, he and Khachanov both, I watched Khachanov lose a match that he just had no business losing. And I was actually mentioning this to Corey Kruger, how, those guys, Rublev, Khachanov, they used to play a lot of doubles, and it's just a perfect example of so many, not to pick on those two, because so many, if they would just play doubles and just serve and go, they'd get the real world repetition they need to be more effective in their singles. And because they're talented guys, they could easily. And to me, that's the shocking thing about this, because it's got to be just fear that hinders people from doing it, because even some people that are capable of doing it aren't doing it. I haven't seen Khachanov and Rublev play doubles much over the last few years, but I think had they continued, had they done it in a different manner, I think both of them would be much, much better, because he does so many positive things out there. But today was another rough day for him. It seems to be a stubbornness that might be a good thing in terms of getting them to where they are, but that just willingness to complete themselves. Like Alcaraz, like Sinner, they're trying to round themselves out a little more. I don't know why players have such a difficult time trying to be better at other things, not just what they're good at currently.
And Rublev, his volleying technique is not so far off. He just doesn't volley. He doesn't have the instincts to go forward. Yeah, stubbornness, that's one of the reasons the players are great. They're very stubborn, but they have to get to the point where they can have that work for them, not just against them. What comes to my mind, my son Connor got deep into a challenger. Believe it was the semis he was in, and he said everything went wrong, food poisoning. But he said that he warmed up with Rublev, and Rublev just teased off. But I was at your place with my son Connor, and he was playing at T-Bar M. And is it Yannick Hoffman, who went to USC, won the last match out as a freshman, the German, and he's still playing. And Ty Tucker and the coach at USC, Peter Smith, pretty clever on Ty's part. They used to share the expenses to bring German players over on recruiting trips. Well, fair enough is they can only take so many players at USC, but a kid's going to go and they're going to see the California sunshine, and then they're going to go visit Columbus, Ohio in the winter. And I go, okay, I think I'll choose California. But that's where Ty had some German players. And so anyway, through that, Connor and Hoffman were friends, and I'm just watching Rublev. He's at T-Bar M, and I know you know the place well. So he's just going from player to player. If there's an open court, he's going from player to player and just wants to hit. And so if someone said yes, he jumped on the court and hit balls. And then if he wasn't hitting balls, he was in the gym like a madman. It didn't look like he had any direction. He was just going from one machine to the next machine. It looked like, too, as 17 years, just trying to pump as much weight as he could. But I remember Connor and Hoffman said, that guy's going to burn himself out. And I go, he's my favorite player here. I've been hanging around here for a lot of days. And this kid, I love this kid. And, he just that passion. But he has Murat Safin in the stands. Murat Safin was asked because he was in politics after he retired in Russia, and they asked him, "Why are you in politics?" He said, "That's where the money is." And no telling what Safin is telling him. I don't see Safin having studied the game. He played the game. His family. They beat the Ritchie family out, where both he and his sister are number one in the world. But just the math, simple math, and that's not a shot at Safin. Is that just in general, I just don't think. All you got to do is listen to podcasts, and you're not going to hear people talk about 130 degrees potential. The potential angle at the net, 3 feet from the net, or you're just not going to talk about stats. If you go up there and you win 2 out of 3. Turns into 4 out of 6, 8 out of 12. You're not going to talk about a green light point. The directional coming in off the approach. But then I think also to the practice. when you're, just to add to your game. To me, it's very much like a musician that can just play one song. And, Braden used to say, well, how many steaks can you eat? So a guy like Rublev, he's making plenty of money. Let's talk about your longtime student, Ashton Kruger. It's similar.
Yeah. I think she, obviously I was there for all of her matches, singles, doubles. And with a little bit of what we just talked about, I think she's going to be up against Anisimova in the third round with a very good chance to win. In many categories, I think she's as good or better, for sure. Having the day in and day out reminding is critical because, to use that phrase, sharpening the saw, keeping it sharp. You don't use something, it's going to get rusty. And I think people at every level tend to practice what they're good at. And it comes down to that ideology of, going with the player's strengths. But I also think that's a slap in the face to players in general, whether it would be Ashlyn or whomever, in that, you don't really see how good a person could become. And that's really all we're talking about. Like you said, people will hear what we're saying and think that there's not any really respect for the players. It's not that at all. It's how good could they be. And a lot of these people are leaving their careers, 6, 7 tenths maximum of where they could be. But the day in and day out has to be there. I think you really, really have to be special to look down the road and then say, okay, this is what I'm doing. And just, that trust the process mentality. Because whether it's a junior or whether it's a player that's at Ashlyn's level, it's the same thing. I mean, you want to have options and you want to make sure that your options that you have are staying sharp on a daily basis. Situational training. I found it interesting that on the practice courts this year, I saw way more people than in past doing some baskets, coaches feeding some balls. Not a lot, but way more than in the past. Because I remember watching Lucas Pouille up there, and I think through the whole tournament, he was the only person that was doing baskets with his coach the year, when Pouille was making quite a good run on the tour at first. And, but now, I think that, what used to be called the Sampras Krug hit has kind of become the norm, and people are hitting, but they're not really working on things. They're not really, it's just a group hit. And, to grow, you're going to have to do it every day. I mean, even when you're at a tournament.
Yeah, and I do think, here in this country, Indian Wells, the way they've set up the stadium, and then also Roger Federer, I always tease that you go to the Open and thousands and thousands of people are watching Roger Federer sit on a bench and watch other people. It is so exciting to watch the practices. But a lot of times the practices that you see, like say Federer at a tennis tournament, and then be told, oh, when he's off the tour, that's not how he practices. And then you can dig deep on the internet and everything. You can ask people who've been part of that, where he would bring 2 juniors over to Dubai and have one for 4 hours in the morning, one for 4 hours in the afternoon. I think with Ashton Kruger, I should be able to tell you Sasha's last name, but he really made his mark where he was a hitting partner for Serena Williams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right? The listeners would know. And then he was with Osaka and a few others, and now he's with Diana Schneider. And she's just, she's already on a 6-pack for as far as coaches are concerned. 6 months, 6 coaches. That's obviously an exaggeration, but it had nothing to do with wanting to be at our place. But we have a lot of tennis courts. This was way back past tense in Tampa, Florida. And Serena Williams was in town because Tampa is the home of the Home Shopping Network. So Serena practiced at our place every day for a week. And I remember practicing her. I remember watching her practice the first time. It was your advice because we were in South Florida and Seguso Bassett. Rick Macy wanted to merge with Seguso Bassett. It was 5 miles away, and I just put myself right on the court numerous times watching that show. But anyway, this guy, he went from sparring partner to coach, but he could imitate players' games. He's very skilled with the racket and could imitate players' games. And someone like an Ashton Kruger, that doesn't take place in junior tennis anymore. It used to be in America that you would just take private lessons. There wasn't homeschooling, and kids would go to camps in the summer, but you give a kid a private lesson after school or on the weekend and say, "I'm going to play you this way. I'm going to play you this way. I'm going to play you this way." And I just don't think people come across that. And I know that that's a negative. If, say, at your place where you're teaching everyone to hit a clean ball and play the right way tactically, that's where they need to get out and play sets and play matches against other people. Martina Hingis' mother, Malador, she was very clever when her daughter was at both Saddlebrook and at Hopman's. They say, "You're going to hit with every kid here. Just to see their ball, see how they swing at the racket, be able to analyze, anticipate." Yeah, you can just tell her serve, Kruger. And the way she was hitting some returns and doubles. Yeah, in a lot of ways, the doubles is it's just icing on a cake, gravy. It's just extra money. But it's so tough for the people to 20% of the money goes to doubles, and then you got to split it. But even for junior tennis players, okay, I'm playing to win. I don't want to let my partner down, but I'm playing also to be able to play all over the court.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. And like we were talking about, use it for real world reps, just to make sure you're getting the reps. Yeah, think long term.
Zverev, Alexander Zverev. It's like, okay, he's still young. He's been so good, 3 finals. But now these younger players, Alcaraz center coming in behind him, Tsitsipas would be put in that category, perhaps even Medvedev. How long did it take Zverev to lower his toss? But he moves so well, but a lot of years went by where I always say, people should listen to Federer. One of the reasons that Federer and Tony Godsick put the Laver Cup together was to teach the next generation how to play. And with Zverev, not being able to force, not being able to take time away and challenge people to hit a smaller target off a passing shot. But in the longer they go, so obviously the people who follow us are mostly parents and junior tennis players. I think Joel Trucker, I've said it many times, he set me straight where I call it going to the net a risk. He said, no, it's an investment. And then if they only go and practice too, is that just, again, principle based, it's short. What are your comments on Zverev?
Well, I remember we actually talked about this up there at the Open a few days ago with Corey Kruger was watching the match with me on my court, and he was playing. He was, making his way onto the Pro Tour, and he was playing Nadal out at Indian Wells. You probably remember it well, and missed a backhand volley, really a sitter, coming forward. Ended up losing the match, and Corey mentioned how I had said, the odds are he isn't going to round that area of his game out. I hoped I was wrong, but here we are. I can't even remember when that match was, but I remember watching that particular point vividly. And gosh, when you can do the things he can do, and he puts so many opportunities on his plate to just really step up and in and attack, but he'll have glimpses of it. Like I said, I could tell Fritz was hinting towards it a little more. But, sometimes you have to go over the top, and yeah, he could have kept playing doubles with his brother, and his brother certainly, I would have thought it would have had a bigger influence on that part of the court with him, because his brother was brilliant going forward.
Well, one thing I heard him say, well, my older brother, I don't listen to him, but I've always been under the premise that if a child is 4 years older, you think about birth order and with siblings, my two boys are 18 months apart, so forget that. I mean, your two kids are pretty close in age, right?
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah, so if it's more than 4 years, but 10 years, so I've always been surprised that I remember Raven Klaasen saying that everybody knew when he was 14 he was going to be one of the best players in the world. And it's just interesting. Tennis history comes into it when they changed the grass at Wimbledon. I mean, Federer in 2 weeks at Wimbledon came in more than he did in a 5-year span at Wimbledon when they changed the grass. But then if you listen to Federer in 2017, when he finally used analytics and said, I should have listened to my dad. My dad kept telling me I was chicken to should hit my backhand. And the Fed, we have juniors do this every once in a while. So say reinforcement 3 times. Make your bridge stronger. You want to make your bridge out of bamboo or make it out of iron? And, he'd run around his backhand and hit in Nadal's lefty forehand. Then Djokovic comes along and Federer's run around his backhand, hit in Djokovic's backhand. And Federer's numbers alone indicated, hey, this guy can really play at the net. And some people say, well, stats are overrated. How about the Swiss kid who's ranked 435, Leandro Rydell? Did you see him at all?
Didn't get to see him. Was following the storyline quite a bit, and he got beat pretty handily this morning, if I'm correct. Went through the qualies, made his way through. Great run. Time will tell. Time will tell. I don't know enough about his game to make really any educated comments on it.
Again, I was sent an article talking about Federer, is that he's at a turning point in his life. He got the chance to go practice with Federer and hit with him several days and talk to him, and Federer just he gave him the gears on this is what you have to do as far as take care of your body and how you need to go about pro tennis. I think with the Federer family, they hired a fitness coach. That would be great. We have this young coach here from Germany. Does an outstanding job. Matt Clore has been trying to help me with helping me get a job, and he's just really educated, and it's his passion. And but the Federer family, they hired a fitness coach for 3 years. At that level, when somebody's 17, 18, 19 years old, we've always said if you had to hire one person, you'd hire the physio fitness expert versus a coach. Mm-hmm. Especially then when you find out what the coaches are actually doing. But no, I was just curious if you had a chance to watch him play. How about the Canadian?
Well,
we'll talk about both of them.
Yeah, watched Shapovalov on the practice court. Didn't had a chance to go in and watch his match with Djokovic, Sinner. But we didn't get over to it. Yeah, and but I watched him play several matches here at the Dallas Open. I think that the conditions here were indoors and the court was pretty quick, and I think it set up nicely for him. I feel like, he's got so many pluses, but I don't know. I just get this sense he's a little bit of a fair weather tennis player, where he's kind of made his mind up what kind of day he's going to have before he even gets done with the first set, and I may be wrong on that, but that's my impression on him. Watch Diallo, who I hadn't seen before. I think like I said, he'd be fun to take for a year with no interference and really see what you could do with his game, because he has a lot of great qualities, but it's just raw in my opinion. And obviously his serve is getting him down the road quite a bit already. And then I was excited to see Auger-Aliassime back in making a great run back inside of this U.S. Open. I definitely, over my time of watching him from entrance onto the tour to now, kind of felt he would really be much more of an impact player day in and day out. But for whatever reason, hasn't been able to sustain it for a lengthy period. So hopefully this will be a catalyst for him.
University of Kentucky. All top Canadian boys go to the University of Kentucky. Actually, one of our guests, Peter Cobell, played a lot of doubles with my son. he talks about working with Diallo. Obviously pretty similar, both same size. And he said that was one of his first challenges when he was brought in as a volunteer at the University of Kentucky. With Shapovalov, I like what Jimmy Ayres said. He goes, I love how he goes to the net, but he's not really sure what he's going to do when he gets up there. Mm-hmm. His mother worked for Richard Hernandez for 10 years, and they just know from staff training. I would do some telephone staff training, and that a lot of people they don't want to hear that the racket, the volley's not hit with a continental grip. And, that's where the top players, they don't say what they do or do what they say is, actually, I was sent some film from the Vic Braden Library of my two boys hitting balls with Vic. They were like 9, 10 years old. And there's film of Vic working with the Bryan boys. That'd be fun it's all been digitized at this point, but to share that and the term Jose Garris, almost a continental grip. Like, how is that racket face at the impact point? With Felix, Miran Man, he spent time with both those kids, especially a lot with Dennis. He was a hitting partner. And Miran is, for listeners, if somebody's listening to this for the first time, I've known Miran 30 years. He just moved from Toronto to Vancouver. And so he was a sparring partner with Dennis. But he traveled with Tennis Canada. I wasn't at the same tournament, but I was overseas the same summer. And I saw Felix play several matches when he was 13. What an athlete. Miran tells a story that, it does happen. The parents went through divorce, so meet with Felix and his older sister, and the older sister is crying. And Felix, at a very young age, it says to his parents, I know you'll work it out, but how am I going to get to practice? But yeah, that's something else too, is that there was a lot written about how he would practice after his match, go out and cleanse his strokes and what have you. But that's another thing too, is that, there's a reason that Alcaraz is on top. Center as well. Alcaraz, though, from a technical standpoint, where he's, center has a better serve, but Alcaraz is how he's moving that racket. But I don't think, and we listen, that's another thing we could do at another time, is that just go through what the commentators are saying here in the U.S. when you're watching it on TV. And it's more small talk than it is fact-finding information. Kervin, he's here to learn. Are you learning anything from this podcast?
A lot of the analysis you guys do with all the players, like I've wrote in too many last names here, and like a little bit of everybody. I would just like to add a little bit of Rublev. So Dave was saying he has really good things, but I think he has to do a better job with emotions. He needs to correct on his mind and move on. Because like I was just watching a little bit of his game against Felix today, and he was just struggling on the first set. Emotionally, he got really mad. He couldn't move on. He lost the first set. Started losing 2-1 on the second set. Yeah. Like it's just pretty interesting how you guys analyze all these players. Yeah.
He's one of the most popular players among the players. He's a really funny guy. But they say that, comedians have a dark side. If he could break through and just add to his game. And then if you went, from players from yesteryear, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned Hamilton by her last name, Alanis Hamilton. I was watching her play doubles, and then I saw where you and Andy were sitting courtside. And what I tell people is, say, well, okay, I've known both Andy and Dave a long time, and with Father Time, I mean, I think I have 10 more years in the game than you, Dave, just with age alone. And then with Andy, it'd be approximately 20. And, just to go back and, I just think of Billie Jean King. And I could ask, like a young Andy Fitzel, I mean, did you ever see Billie Jean King play in her prime? And I remember watching her play at Wimbledon, and there's nobody in women's tennis, not to take a shot at women's tennis, nobody comes close to how she played at the net. Of course, they're playing with wooden rackets. The 3 of the 4 majors were on grass. And, they were taught poorly. Years ago, tennis teachers did really I think, do a better job in the sense, okay, there's going to be a ready position, there's going to be a unit turn. There was more effort to try to teach. As even like the master Welby Van Horn, Welby later in life knew that he made the mistake of telling young kids there's a beginner grip, which on the forehand side would be Eastern, and then there's a championship grip. And it wasn't continental, it was composite. And I remember being in the nursing home with Welby and we're watching Federer play. But with Alanis Hamilton, for our listeners, first of all, hats off to her and her parents. She's at the U.S. Open. And she was ranked, 2 or 3 in the doubles this year playing for North Carolina. And I'm sending a text to her childhood coach, Cole Reeves, family's from Arkansas. I know they've been based in Dallas now with you, Dave, and her sister's been ranked as high as 1 in the country. And so I just sent a text to Cole Reeves. I go, are you in New York watching this or are you watching online? He was watching online. And he goes, it's hard to watch. She's hitting lobs so many lobs off the backhand return. And then my next text was bingo, because as soon as I read that, I look up and that's exactly what she hit. What was your take on their tennis with their partner? Obviously, very athletic girl, Brent Meyer.
Yeah, I mean, I know both their games through. I mean, obviously, Alanis from daily, involvement here at one point, and I've watched Brent Meyer play quite a bit actually. She, played Ashlyn Kruger in the finals of the girls hardcourt to get into the U.S. Open 4 years ago now. And then she played again. I watched her play the doubles final there as well. And then I watched him play the U.S. Open junior final. I feel like, sometimes players are slipping on a downward slope and they're sliding down a downward slope in their game. And because maybe they're a little more mature, maybe a little bit bigger physically, perhaps better, that it's not evident to them. But I would say that in both cases, Brent Meyer and Hamilton, that they were probably both better 2 to 3 years ago in terms of how they hit the tennis ball and what they were doing. But yeah, Brent Meyer's a terrific athlete. If she split up her volley a little bit better and got some of the calculating out of her groundies and her serves in the ballpark, and with Alanis, I think it would come back to her quickly, but she needs to think again long term, and really these periods in the summer for her should have been utilized as suggested, which would have been really 3-month training blocks of nothing but weight room, multi-sporting, and rebuilding skill sets that I think have gradually eroded because she kind of lived on the road since she was about just past 16, chasing the ITFs, chasing the ITF juniors and the entry level pro stuff. And I asked her, I said, how many times have you guys ever talked about your junior careers at North Carolina in one semester? She said, never. It's never been brought up. And I said, you want to learn from that because you're going to have a similar encounter in your life when you think that you've arrived, but you haven't arrived, and you got to keep building. But I think they're both in the same boat, even though they have much different backgrounds.
Brent Meyer, amazing personality. Sophia Patel has been a guest. She was a teammate, MVP, and not in the lineup, MVP when they won in 2023, UNC. And I was doing a workshop in North Carolina, and when Brent Meyer's on crutches, she came to it. And she actually, Matt Clore had her join us for, came in to be filmed, and very, very nice family. But we filmed in the morning, and then filmed in the first part of practice. Actually, it was just one session, and then we were like 3 hours from Orlando, and I think Kathy Rinaldi was one who called in and said Madison Keys needs a practice partner, and boom, she was gone. We never filmed her. But then even then, if you film someone, it's like, well, who Andy Fitzell used to always say this is that, well, who's going to do the follow-up work? I know Matt Clore does a lot of that with the USTAs. People that are national coaches, they go in and they go through film, but then it's like, okay, but let's get out on the court. The application is that, I always tell people, I think I could take a lawnmower apart, but I don't think I could put it back together. And, it's just like on the flip side of it, taking this time on our podcast and talking about pros is beginners. I mean, I'm always telling advanced coaches, high performance coaches, as I remember telling Craig Tiley and Bruce Burke, said, you guys should never stop teaching beginners. Because it's a skill set. It's just like hitting cross-court forehands. And if you don't, you don't. The alphabet soup with Elena's, the USTA, the UNC, ITF, WTA. When she qualified to play the US Open, I was thinking, well, great, you get to go play the US Open, but, you should really take the whole summer and do exactly what you just said, is go back to the drawing board, go back to basics. And, what got you to the level that you were at? She should, it would be no better place to go than where she started with Cole Reeves. Cole's is a technician, you can take a car apart and put it together. Along those lines, watched Austin Krajicek, who, such a class act he had probably the worst day of his career. It just worked out where it was lunchtime and it's okay, I'll watch this match. And, the father, Rob, he certainly would know more about the GreatBase than Austin. It's like I always tell people about Roger Federer. If you want to know what Roger Federer did when he was really young, you would have to ask the parents, especially Lynette, who was the mother, who was a volunteer coach. And I understand that she started playing tennis relatively late and became a very respectable player. And we use that quote all the time, where it's almost, I'd say verbatim, or Lynette Federer, when he was 8 years old, his lessons were 1 hour long. He stood in one place with long follow-throughs. And you think that Adolf Kavoski, mispronouncing his name, I'm sure, people would want to interview him. Who taught Roger Federer when he was really young? It's like going back, as I said earlier in this podcast, with Djokovic's childhood coach used Braden books. Just going back to the well. And in other sports, I'm a big fan of hockey. And I was in Toronto to live. I've been there many times to do workshops, but I was there for 2 years and I studied ice skating. And the person I selected, Yari Boriski coached Connor McDavid, among others. And so it's the NHL and they're warming up. And sure enough, Connor McDavid is doing drills that he was taught when he was 7, 8 years old. Yeah, the culture of tennis teaching, culture of tennis coaching. I guess we could wrap it up on that comment. Celebration of tennis is so exciting to have the tennis come right into your living room. And hats off to all the players, all the families to be at the US Open. But I don't think that enough being done to improve and that's what we're trying to do with our podcast. We're just sharing information from people who were very, very successful teaching tennis. But Kervin, what do you got for us? Why don't you wrap it up for us?
About the podcast, or in general, my whole stance here at the...
Either or, the podcast, your visit, 2 weeks we mentioned Chad Berryhill. We got 2 people here who spent time under Chad, and Chad used to tell people, if you really want to know what's going on here, you got to come here for 2 years. He said everything else is a blink of an eye. 2 years, and then you start to put things together. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, I think I need to thank Miron Man and Patrick because of them I'm here. Miron Man introduced me to GreatBase and to you, Coach Steve. And I feel like these 2 weeks I'm staying here at Virginia, it's a lot of learning for me. I was just telling my wife, I want to come back right away. Like I want to stay longer. And I find out that like the way that we see tennis here is actually, again, there's no right or wrong, right? But I feel like we try to understand tennis the best way we can do, and we try to transfer information to our students. And now for me, it's a big opportunity to stay here, to just spend court time with you, listen to every word comes out of your mouth, and just watching matches with you. I think it's just been amazing. Just taking a lot of notes every single day. I'm sending my notes to Patrick. I'm going to send it to Miran as well. But I would recommend, like, if it would be on me, I would recommend every tennis coach, to study the game, keep educating themselves. It's not what they taught us on the past, but it's what we can do for the future, right? And if we have information, if we practice our craft, if we love our craft, then we can make tennis get better at some point, yeah.
No, it's well put. Thank you for the kind words. I think one thing for listeners, we need more young coaches like yourself, Kervin, where it's not about the money. I say it many times in these podcasts, is that it's become too much of in this country, perhaps around the world, tennis has become too much of a business, and we need to circle back and make it more of a sport. I flattered to say you'd like to come back right away and stay longer. There are a lot of people that are still currently involved in junior tennis, that they get to be 16, 17, 18, or they're now in college tennis. And the expression is they don't come back to the well. And, and I say that if people were to come back to work here, to work with us, they don't need to come back for tennis information. They need to come back to character. And, it's just like, no, I have to go back and work on basics. Work on basics. I mean, and not to be negative about the college coaching situation, but the romance period when people are recruited and we're going to do this for you and do that for you. And it's just gone to the point where some college coaches, they'll actually keep a scholarship in hand because now of the portal, which makes it really difficult for juniors coming up because coaches have to first look at who wants to transfer. And to me, it's really not coaching. It's not developmental coaching. If you're telling a recruit, no, you don't have to come the fall semester, but you need to be here in January. I mean, that's just like, if I was a parent, I would run the other way. It's like, no, that's not where I want to send my child. I want to send my child where they got to come in and, just like the football culture, there's systems to learn and, get a pencil and paper out, start taking notes, and we're going to take this to a higher level. But it's just it's just like a flip flop between the football mentality and the tennis. But thank you, Kervin. Dave, what do you got? You sign it off. North Dakota kid, what do you got?
Well, I mean, I would say this to the parents and the players. You've said it many times. I got this from you. College tennis is a goal. Pro tennis is a dream. We were a weekend of getting to watch players who actually have been able to make it their dream come true. But I think that it's all about the process. And, I'll finish with Jim Lair's quote, there's no point of arrival. So whether you're, a 6 UTR, an 8 UTR, or a 15 UTR, the process is really where the joy is. And there is no point of arrival. And once you understand that, and once you start living that, I think that your day in and day out, no matter what you're doing as a coach or a player, becomes a really, really rewarding thing.
No, it's great. Just to digress, we have a young boy who's working so hard, and he played a teaching pros at a lower level, and that was one thing today. But another was the fitness coach was talking to him. He goes, I've easily put you through this for 120 practices. You've been here 60 days, two times a day. And then I asked him afterwards, I said, he's very introverted. I said, okay, tell the coach. We all came in and I said, tell us what the fitness coach told you. And he really couldn't put it in words. Like say Jim Lair, wordsmith. How's it go? You said it. Tennis players never arrive. They're always in transition to a better place. So I write that down. And you make that a story. Then the players need to be able to say that. And it needs to become important to them. And we call it a mind vitamin. So I said, at the end of the day, I said, I want you to have written down what the coach told you. I want you to ask the gal next to you who's much older, much more experienced and doing it much better. And then you just make it a story. And I think one of Valera's books, Storytelling for Mental Toughness. What's your story? I did ask my brother one time back in the 70s, maybe 60s. The line was, "What's your act?" And I made the mistake of saying it to one of my older brothers, "What's your act?" And he said, "The last scene in your play." And, there's too much of that killing with kindness. But again, like Jessica Pegula, I mean, we're not trying to be the armchair quarterback. The players at the U.S. Open, hats off to them, but to be a student of the game, and we can look at the very best and not be awestruck. You don't want the off factor. If you have the off factor, you think someone else is awesome, and you won't accomplish what they accomplished. But Davido, next time we'll do this in Spanish. Kervin, give me the high five. And great to have Kervin here visiting. And we hope that we have a few golden nuggets from this lengthy podcast to have tennis people, tennis enthusiasts put in their tennis treasure chest. Adios, amigos.
Okay, sounds good. Have a good day.
All right, thank you. Adios, Bryan.
Thank you.
Kervin, thank you very much. Dave, awesome.
Thanks, Steve.